Hello, and welcome to another edition of Tips for the Webex User. My name is Matthew White, here with the BTC at Ingram Micro, Business Transformation Center. And today we're going to talk to you a little bit about how to secure your virtual meetings. So why might somebody want to secure a virtual meeting? There's a lot of different reasons out there, whether it be HIPAA compliancy, or maybe it is because of it's a federal government customer and they want their information to be highly secure, or maybe it's a corporation that wants to make sure that their numbers aren't getting leaked ahead of time. Whatever that reason may be, it's really going to depend on what the vertical is and who the customer is and what they're going to care about the most. So as a reseller for the WebEx solution, you want to really make sure you understand what's important about security to your particular end user, and then show them how WebEx can actually help that. So what might be important to them, and then moving forward. And we'll talk a little bit about some of these security measures that they can take as we go on. Before we get too far into this, I want to make sure that you guys are very aware of the different terms that can be used when people are talking about having a problem with security in a virtual meeting. One of those is bombing. So this is going to be a relatively new term, but this is pretty much where someone joins a meeting and disrupts it to the point where that meeting can no longer be productive, whether that be pictures or whatever they're doing in that meeting that can really disrupt the meeting as a whole. You want to make sure that they're being blocked from doing that, whether that is making sure that they don't have permissions to share content or making sure that the right people are in the meeting and not being shared with other people. Those are the type of things you can do to help block the bombing exposure piece. But really here, you just want to make sure that you understand what bombing is. Snooping is another piece that can often happen in a virtual meeting. It's easy to look across the table and see who might be in that room with you. And in most corporations, you're not going to find somebody hidden in your closet. But snooping can still happen in a virtual meeting and happen relatively easy if you're not aware of who's actually in your meeting. So from a snooping standpoint, just make sure you're locking your meeting down so that whenever there's sensitive data being introduced to a conversation, the people that are in that meeting are the people that need to know about that sensitive data and nobody else. When you get a compromise of sensitive data, you're really talking about three different areas, either personal data, sensitive data, or private data. If you're in a personal data field, that could be a personal email address or a phone number or a mailing address or whatever it may be, and you want to keep that information locked down. And then there's also sensitive data, because in the sensitive data world, there's things like numbers that you don't want to really release out there. It might not be legally against the rules to get that information out there, but it could actually disrupt your business as a whole, and it could cause harm when it's disclosed to other people. There's also hacking. So hacking is another way that people can try to break into a virtual system and find out information about your users. So a hacker may try to break into a control system and find out all the email addresses of somebody that attended your meeting or all the email addresses of people that have accounts on your system, and then try to do a phishing attack or something else down the road to really try to get information and additional information from what they already have from those users. So the big thing that you want to bring across to your particular end users when you're talking about the Cisco solution is that Cisco does not think about WebEx and security in two separate areas. They think about these as one. From the ground up, from the very beginning, security was part of that discussion when it came to WebEx and pretty much all Cisco products. So they make sure that security is not an afterthought, but it's thought of from the very beginning. We're going to go through some of these security standards on the left-hand side here so you understand what these are, so you can better talk about these when you're talking to your customers. So there's an ISO 27001 certification, and this pretty much means that there's an information security standard for secure environments. Cisco goes through this process to make sure that their environments are secure and that people aren't just easily able to hack into them. There's also a Service Organization Controls, SOC, Type 2 audited. This means that somebody can pretty much make a protocol that we're going to do when XYZ happens and how we live up to that protocol and how we're developing our tools and our product to adhere to security standards. Now, it's great to say that. That's a very high level capability, but Cisco takes it a step further in this type 2 audited scenario where they actually have a third party entity come in and they actually make sure that Cisco is doing everything they say they're doing. So that way they're not just saying one thing and doing something else. They're actually audited by a third party to make sure that they're doing it and make sure that people are following those protocols the way that they're supposed to be following those protocols. There's also the FedRAMP certified customers. So this is a separate program in the WebEx environment. So you do have to get a separate authorization to sell the FedRAMP certified product, but it looks like standard WebEx to most people. And this is really gives governments a little bit more insight and visibility into how their solution is comprised. And it gives them that extra layer of comfort when it comes to using a cloud-based product. The Cloud Computing Compliance Control Catalog C5, this is really to make sure that people that are in another country, in this particular one it's Germany, it has the ability to know that it's hitting all the requirements that they need as a German standard for a government entity to be using a cloud-based system as well. And then we have the Privacy Shield Framework Certified. This is to make sure that the privacy of US, Swiss, and EU customers is being upheld to the standard that it's supposed to be for personal information, whether it be email addresses, birth dates, whatever it may be that this system is keeping track of, it's not being used or misused for anything that it's not supposed to be. And there's a lot of features when it comes to WebEx and how they keep your stuff secure. And we're going to go through these a little bit more detail, so I'll not mention these yet. But these are some of the main top ones that people often talk about, and we'll go into these in a little bit more detail here. So let's take a walk and actually better understand some of these different areas and these steps that you would want to take to make sure that your environment is secure. So first off, account management. So as you can see on the right-hand side there, that's just a snippet of WebEx Control Hub and all the different things that you can control in there. But the first and foremost thing you want to do is set up an organization. You want to make sure that that organization has the right stipulations in place to make sure that that organization is secure, whether it be password stipulations or whether it be who you have in the organization to keep it secure. Those are things that you want to make sure you're doing. As far as managing users, so you can make sure that the users have the particular authorizations or the licenses that they need to actually get the work done, and make sure that the right people are in your organization and people that aren't supposed to be in your organization stay out of your organization. You can also register devices with your organization. So you can make sure that when you as a individual get a new product from Cisco, whether it be a DX80 or RoomKit Plus or whatever that hardware may be, you can actually register those systems in Control Hub as well and keep track of where those are, who has them, and the usage as well. And that's kind of where we come to this point, the usage reports, and it tells us how these products are being used, how WebEx is being used, and you can make sure that people are using it correctly. And you can also keep tabs on how well your usage patterns are going out there. Maybe it's certain people that don't need access anymore can be taken out. And then just overall configuration of services, making sure that every piece of WebEx, no matter what it may be, is configured in the way that you as a company want. So you have complete control over your company. So the second step you want to do is making sure that your meetings are secure and that they're unlisted if you want them to be unlisted, that they're not a larger event that people are going to find on your site, that if they're more of a private meeting, you keep those unlisted, and you can keep that as the default standard for organization if you want in WebEx. You can also exclude passwords from meeting invites so that you have to send them the password separately or they have to find the password separately that you post somewhere else. And that way, by subdividing those two, it's less likely that that invite is going to be accidentally forwarded to the wrong person and have that information available and they can just log in. There's also the requirement for a WebEx account when joining from a phone. So if you are joining from a cell phone or a landline, you can join a WebEx meeting. However, that does open you up to a little bit more of a security vulnerability if you're just letting anybody dial in. So whether that be a PIN that they have to enter or that in this particular case that they want to have a WebEx account on your system before they can join via phone, they have to log in and everything. You can set that up as one of the security protocols in the system. You can also join before a host. So Something that a lot of people do to make it easier for people that are joining is if the host is running late or the host arrives usually right on time, if people are dialing in a few minutes early, they can still get into that meeting, set up their camera, set up their audio all ahead of time. So when the meeting starts, it can happen more seamlessly. That's a great feature. However, some people don't like that because then people can talk before the host arrives or even just mess with things or show their video, things on their video before a teacher or host arrives to that meeting. So if you turn this off, then you can make it that people can't join until the host joins. So everybody kind of sits in a waiting room until the host joins, and then everybody kind of gets kicked in. You can also set up some minimum password requirements, whether it be the number of characters in the password or certain types of characters, like special characters that have to be added as well. You can do that from the admin side to make it so that people can't just create a very easy password. You can also make certain passwords not be used, like somebody can't use password as their password. That can be set up at the admin side as well. You can also require certain attendees to have email addresses in the system. So that way, when you go in there, you can see who it was that attended the meetings and you can make sure that they're the ones that you wanted to have attend and actually tie those two together either via an outcall campaign afterwards or an email afterwards to let them know that, hey, here's your follow-up information that you may need. But really, it keeps you having more information about who's joining your meeting so you can keep better tabs on that. There's also the audible announcement when recording is enabled. There's some states out there that do require you to alert people when they're being recorded, so that way they're not complaining later or legally complaining later that they were recorded without their knowledge. So an audible announcement when recording is enabled is a great feature to just have as a standard on. So when you start recording, it automatically announces to everybody that recording has started. As you can see here, this is from inside the site settings in Webex Control Hub. There's a lot of different settings that you can get at when you're trying to manage your either Webex Meeting Center, Webex Event Center, Training Center. You can actually manage all these separately, and there's also some general settings across the board, and there's even recording settings. But all these different areas have a lot of settings underneath them. It's great to go through these when you're first setting up your account to make sure that these are all set the way that you as a company want them to be set to have the right level of security for yourself. So auto lock is something that enables you to lock a meeting as soon as you start it or 5 minutes after you start it. Whatever you may want, you can set that up. But that really allows you to keep a meeting locked down. So really think of it as if this was a real room, you'd be walking into that room and closing that door behind you. If somebody else wants to join that room, they can knock on that door, or they'll be, in this particular case, they'll be placed into a waiting room and you can allow them in. So as you can see here, here's some settings from the control hub. So anyone can enter an unlocked room, or a signed in attendee can enter an unlocked room, or nobody can enter a locked room if they're not signed in first. So really, if somebody's not signed into the system, if you pick that last one, it'll just say, sorry, the room's locked, and hang up on them, and they can't get in at all. They can also choose to change a host pin or have a host pin. So that way when you jump into the meeting, you have to type in a pin to be able to get in. And there's also a change URL. So in most cases, a URL may be a certain standard, like a first and last name. But you can also have that set up that an individual can change their URL. Maybe it's because they got married, or maybe it's just because they want to make sure that it's a little bit more secure and people can't just easily guess their URL for their personal room. And you can also have alternate hosts. So alternate hosts allow for you to lock something down so that way uh, you can really have you as the owner of that meeting pass that meeting off to somebody else. So I can say, Jimmy, who usually joins as a secondary teacher, he can actually be that person that's actually training the team as well. If I can't make that meeting, he can still launch the meeting for me. Step 3 is your single sign-on. So pretty much here, single sign-on identity providers is a quick way of letting you know that this is the same person signed into all the tools, whether that be your laptop, you're signed into Microsoft, Office 365, and 30 other applications that now need you to sign on to. A lot of these tools are now using two-factor authentication to make sure that you are the individual you say you are, whether it's shoots you a text message or an email or something else that you got to then say, yes, this is me, allow me into this tool. Well, this becomes very cumbersome to the people. The more secure something is, usually the harder it ends up becoming to use. But things like Duo and other products out there help to make this easier with what they call single sign-on that allows you to sign into more than one application at one time. And you can still use two-factor authentication for things like this. Duo is Cisco's offering for this. It's relatively easy to use and it's set up very quickly. So if you're in the market for a new solution or if you haven't heard of Duo, I would recommend setting up a separate call with us to really discuss the multi-factor authentication with Duo and how to use single sign on and all these together. And we actually have a specialist that's dedicated to this product offering, so we can definitely walk you through this and how this actually works. Step 4 is end-to-end security. So you don't want to think about just security from the meeting itself's point of view. You want to think about this as a whole. Like, how is this staying secure from point A to point B and everywhere in between? So Cisco has something called end-to-end encryption. Webex Teams actually has this built into it, where you can actually encrypt something at the computer level. So if I'm having a meeting, my computer encrypts it. It sends it through the cloud to the other person and then decrypts it at the other person's location. This is much more secure than a lot of the other competitors out there who maybe encrypt it at your side, but then decrypt it in the cloud and then re-encrypt it and send it on to somebody else. So there's a lot of other solutions out there that are everywhere in between those two, but really Cisco is going to keep you really secure with their full end-to-end encryption, where it's from one end all the way to the other. And if you're using WebEx, not just WebEx Teams, there is end-to-end encryption you can get with that as well. And pretty much that allows you to encrypt it from point A all the way through to point B without decrypting in the cloud. But you have to remember that it has to get enabled and you have to use voice over IP if you want to enable that feature. If you have people just calling in from a standard cell phone, obviously it can't be encrypted all the way through because that cellular data has got to get through to them somehow, and it's coming in through a different method. There's also recording security. So when you record a meeting, because maybe somebody's late or somebody couldn't make the meeting and they have to be able to view it at another time, you can do that with Cisco Webex, and you can do that with a lot of other solutions out there as well. But the problem with a lot of those other solutions is that that recording now is pretty easy to get at. And when you put up a secure recording, but that keep the recording not secure, you lose that capability of saying that you're really keeping in compliance with all this information. So what I mean by that is, let's say somebody calls in, has a meeting, they kept everything secure, they made sure that people weren't in the meeting that weren't supposed to be in the meeting, but then they recorded that meeting and then put that meeting up on a site that wasn't secure. So now anybody, not just the people they wanted to have in that meeting, can now view it. So Cisco has recording security as well, which you can enact a password to make sure that people can't get at that meeting without having that password as well. And then Cisco also has an extended security pack, which gives you even more security options when it comes to compliancy and making sure that things can be audited by a compliance officer inside your company. And we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail, actually. So part of that solution is the Cisco Cloudlock for WebEx Teams. So this actually is something that you can add in, and it's part of that extended security pack, but this will give you the ability to really monitor what's going on inside your company and make sure that information that you don't want to have leaked is not going to be leaked. So if they're having a conversation with somebody outside of, say, your normal circles and they want to send that outside of the company, whether that be a personal identification information, personal health information, payment card information, Cloudlock can actually look for those things and actually erase them from the message. So that way they're not getting sent outside. It can send the person who sent it a warning message. It can send you as an auditor a warning message to say this was sent, and you can have that discussion with them and really have that training with them to help them understand why they're not supposed to be sending that information. Another step is endpoint security. So when I talk about endpoint security, I'm talking about securing the actual computer or device that you're calling from or having those messages sent from. Whether that be you're making sure that people aren't going to sites that you don't want them to with Cisco Umbrella and blocking those unsecure sites, or whether it be making sure that the devices themselves are secured with something like an AMP for endpoints with virus protection and trying to find out where those problems may lie before they become a problem. These are great things to also think about in your environment to really spin up for those people that, especially if they're not working in the office and you don't have as much control over where they go. These type of cloud solutions are really good for protecting people. And then we also have room device security. So when it comes to wirelessly sharing with a room device or just having a call with a room device, the security doesn't just stop there. We also have ways to secure those environments, whether it be an audio signal that is used to understand the proximity you are to the device and if you're in the room, and then being able to not only make that connection easier, but also make it so that it's more secure so that you're not sharing to a room that you're not supposed to be sharing to, or even like the Touch 10 shows you who's connected wirelessly, so that way they're not being able to bomb the meeting later or being able to see what you're actually presenting when they're not supposed to be seeing what you're presenting. So these are all great features, and you can turn them on and off as you choose, but these are all things that you want to keep in mind of when you're talking to somebody about security and all the things that Cisco can do to help keep your environment secure. So that was another tips for the Webex user. My name is Matthew White, BTC engineer here with Ingram Micro, and we'll see you next time.